The objective of storytelling is to, like you said, create an emotional connection, but I think it's also to have people really understand and kind of absorb the information that you're telling them about the product in a way that feels compelling, memorable, relevant. I think we live in an era where digital teams need to report to the CEO or the COO or whoever their boss is and say, like, we spent this much and we got this much ROI. I think that high level management is now very used to this, like, immediate feedback loop from marketing investments on digital. You need to have a leader who has a clear idea of what they're trying to achieve and therefore obviously communicate and explain to people why we are doing this, what is the point, and where are we going. I think fundamentally that's the most important.
My guest today is Elisabeth de Gramont, who's going to tell me if I said that name right in a second. Elisabeth is the Chief Brand Officer for Unified Commerce Group, a next-generation retail platform that operates and invests in purpose-driven brands chosen for their authenticity and borderless appeal. At UCG, Elisabeth leads marketing strategy and developing brand propositions for its 4 portfolio brands: Franken Oak, Spiritual Gangster, Greats, and Boom. Well, Boom, I'm sure I mispronounced that. She'll tell me that one too. Prior to working with UCG, Elisabeth led the APAC office for C-Space, a global insights consultancy, where she worked with many of the world's largest brands, including Coca-Cola, L'Oreal, and Mars Wrigley, on their China marketing and product development strategies. As a leader, Elisabeth is passionate about enabling insight-driven cultures and organizations while breeding customer understanding and empathy among teams. Elisabeth, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, number one, how close did I come to your last name?
Close enough.
Okay.
No one knows how to pronounce my name, even myself. So.
And then the brand, BOHME. How do you say that?
Oh, I think you said that perfectly. It's Boom.
Boom. Oh, okay.
Perfect.
I'm proud of myself. Okay. Well, welcome to the show. I'm looking forward to this conversation. We got a really good off-air lead-up conversation to this, and I think this is going to be just a great extension of that. So I'd love to just jump right in with the holistic world of our friend marketing and branding and whatever falls under those. And I like to start really high level to pick your brain on what's the biggest challenging marketers face today, and how do you think they can overcome it?
Oh, interesting. Well, I think that if you're talking very high level, it's really, I would say, the fragmentation of the media industry. I mean, I think at the end of the day, there are marketers still working out there who remember when the main way to advertise to customers was through TV commercials and, investing a lot in, investing so much thought in thinking about the creative and the planning and the strategy behind. And then, of course, the distribution aspect is relatively simple. Whereas now, as we know, the media industry is so fragmented, and where customers get their information is so fragmented. And the importance of, that bucket called word of mouth is much harder to control, I would say. It used to be word of mouth came from, again, someone saw it on TV, in the news, they talk about it with their friends, at school, at work, with their neighbors. But now word of mouth also comes, they hear about it through digital channels, and then word of mouth comes through social media and maybe people you didn't even meet before. And it's not just your community and your neighbors. So that kind of sounds very old fashioned. But it's, fundamentally, that's what it is. Then we came into an era where obviously it was all about, the beauty of digital marketing and digital advertising on the big platforms that we know. And then now it's so oversaturated and increasingly expensive. So people are looking for new ways to figure out how to reach their customer, but it has to be much more micro targeted and a lot of experimentation, I would say.
Right. It's definitely an interesting time. And I am so in agreement with you about the quote unquote old school marketers that are still out there. It's kind of interesting when you think about it. I mean, as we approach 2025, the number, and obviously you and I don't know the number, but how many are still kind of stuck? Is that the right word? In their old ways?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, stuck in their old ways, or there's new people. I mean, I think there's a lot of young people working in marketing now who don't know anything about that. And it also means that, there used to be frameworks of how do you kind of speak to customers? What is an insight? How do we talk about features and benefits? How do we form creative and messaging around all of those things? Whereas now I think it's very hard it's easy to say there's theory and there's strategy, but then it's hard to say, how do I apply this if I have to make 100 different, pieces of creative for different channels to be used in different ways and that are being tested and need to be read and reacted to urgently. So I think it's a really interesting time. It's very exciting because there's so much change and novelty. And I think there are content creators, obviously on social media, who are also reinventing ways to popularize product, talk about products. They might not be aware of it, but they're kind of changing the way that people understand and know about product, services, whatever it is that you're marketing. And so therefore there's different models, but I would say there's fewer blueprints of how to do it.
It totally makes sense. And you mentioned the word channels a few minutes ago, and it's a good segue into what I want to talk about next is, and I don't know what the latest stat is, but when it comes to channels or touch points, whatever you want to call it, I think the average consumer, I want to say around 5 to 7 touch points before a decision or something like that. But the question is, how does a brand, and if you want to be specific about how you manage this, how do they stay consistent across all those different touch points?
Well, I think that staying consistent is actually less of an issue than making the right message for the right channel. I would say that probably actually what a lot of brands do as they adapt into kind of a new multi-channel universe is they try to stay too consistent. And therefore they are putting things on, say, TikTok that is relevant to, the way their brand image and the brand guidelines are, but not relevant to the platform. And so therefore don't gain traction. And I think that that's kind of the fine balance is how do you, again, it's like the old way of brand guidelines. Here's my brand guidelines. These are my logo usage. Here are my colors. Here are the things we say. Here are the things we don't say. But then what you're learning is that, the content that people are looking for in TikTok versus Instagram versus YouTube versus from the brand website, the sort of style and level of consistency, quote unquote professionalism is very different to gain traction in each of those channels. So the bigger challenge is how do you maintain a brand identity, brand personality that's identifiable, but you're still able to, have beautiful campaign imagery on your website and then very raw, sort of lo-fi, fun and goofy TikTok content that ends up gaining traction among that audience. And so I think that's the tricky thing. Being consistent is not necessarily hard. It's like maintaining your identifiable brand while adapting to how to gain traction and visibility in the different ecosystems that have very different kind of rules and norms.
It's almost like it's contextually consistent, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like I would say, a brand that, obviously, I think a lot of people know about and have celebrated on social media as Duolingo, which, what's interesting about Duolingo is they are an app, they're a service. They have language learning games, essentially. But, in app, the copywriting, the graphics, is a very kind of specific tone, and it's very different from their competitors like a Babbel or Rosetta Stone. And then in their TikTok, they're not necessarily creating. It's like I don't think that they're that worried about, say, brand guidelines, what you say or don't say, but they maintain that like sort of fun, goofy spirit by really utilizing the people that work in them, their mascot, which is Duo the owl, and they really double down on what are those fun things that are in the app that people know about and are identifiable, but they create all these new stories that are outside of it on social media.
Right. Okay. That makes sense. Storytelling. It's a big buzzword. It still is. How do you look at storytelling within your brands first, and then how should brands look at? Because to me, storytelling is all about creating that emotional connection, right? But like everything else, there's a right way and wrong way.
Yeah. I would say, I would say maybe I wouldn't say there's a right way and a wrong way. I think it's like, did you achieve the objective well enough? I think, storytelling, the objective of storytelling is to, like you said, create an emotional connection. But I think it's also to have people really understand and kind of absorb the information that you're telling them about the product in a way that feels compelling, memorable, relevant. And so, I think that I think storytelling in the past, again, was much more like, let's create like the beautiful iPhone ads and, they're like super high production value. And the amazing thing is that, I don't know, old iPhone, obviously there's been a lot of generations of iPhone. I talk about the iPhones where it's like, so-and-so movie director has shot this whole short film on his iPad or on his iPhone. And wow, are you amazed that this beautiful production value was just shot with this beautiful little device, just one thing that's replaced, the whole movie studio apparatus. Or at least that's, as a customer, kind of like the message that you get. But I think that, not everyone is going to have that type of huge high production value. So I think that there's a couple different like new evolutions in storytelling for newer brands. I think one is very much anchored around the founder story. And I think this is an interesting one for brands like ours because we have essentially acquired and sort of taken over operations for brands that had, many of them, a strong founder story, and most of them, the founder is no longer involved. So we're evolving kind of the ethos of how the brand started, but we can't really rely on the person as much. Whereas, I think you see a lot of, like in our space, D2C apparel brands, jewelry, accessories, where you still very much, there's a lot of emails that are from the founder talking about their values, their family, why they created this product. And so it's very sort of personal and authentic, which I think was very core to this direct to consumer brand kind of like revolution incubation that happened, between 2010 and 2020, essentially. And then now I think you see that, some of these brands have scaled and you need to find storytelling that is around product, but then also kind of your reason for being and your positioning in the market. And so that's where you have to be a little bit more strategic and you can't just rely on the like founding myth, so to speak. It's right. like Nike, obviously an amazing example, like, in the 70s, they could still rely on their founding myth. And then now they've had to evolve as a bigger ethos. And I think that now the challenge is for some of these newer brands, smaller brands, they're kind of in that phase where they have to find how do they continue the aura around the brand, but not just rely on, I'm a founder who started this product because I saw the specific need, because now they have way more products, for example.
Right. They kind of outgrew the original story.
Yeah, I think that it's like, there's a lot of brands right now that are probably in that phase that are outgrowing that founding story that they really were able to milk on social media and sort of with their customer base. And then as they acquire new customers, they need to figure out really like, what is my positioning? Like, I started out making if you look at Allbirds, for example, like we started out making this one shoe out of the merino wool because the founder is from New Zealand and he knew that this was a more sustainable material and it has all these functional features. And so that's like a great founding story that starts and kicks it off. But then what is the next thing that you're doing to really broaden your appeal against a much bigger audience that might be less emotional about the sustainability story? And then also broaden your product offering. So you can't just be talking about your one sort of product that started it all.
Gotcha. Makes sense. Hey, sorry for the interruption. We're going to get back to our show in one quick second, but stay with me. If you're in the need for anything SEO and or link building related, you need to do yourself one quick favor. You need to go to the website that's on the screen right now, stanventures.com. Go there, tell them Steve-O sent you. The rest will take care of itself. Trust me. You can thank me later. Want to move to a specific part of marketing e-commerce, which obviously you're focused entirely on, right? And specifically, I want to start with the CX, right, or the shopping experience. And personalization, of course, is important to every brand. But how can an e-commerce brand create that personalized shopping experience?
Well, I think if you're talking about personalization, as in like, Elisabeth, see search results that are tailored to me based on my browsing and shopping history. There are basically AI tools to do that. So, we use a tool called Nosto across our brands that drives, more quote unquote personalized, visual web merchandising. And so, I think that there's a lot of solutions there are solutions for that now, and that will continue to evolve. And to think that technology will be smarter than the human judgment, especially in an industry like ours, fashion, which is very subjective and sort of at people's whims of what they think is, cool, trendy, hot, colorful, etc. But I think in terms of personalization, at the end of the day, there's still a big need to understand your customer and understand your customer segments and understand, how people are buying. And I think, obviously your AI tools can give you kind of personalization based on that person's browsing history, shopping history. But I do think it's important for brands to, really be the ones to drive, like, why is it that a big segment of our customer is only buying on sale? And like, how do we speak to them differently? Our like markdown sale customer versus our full price customer. And, I think you still need the people on the marketing team, on the digital team to be asking the questions to go find the right answers of who are different types of personality segments that we could be speaking to on in more, compelling and unique ways. But then I think when it comes down to like the individual and that individual's choices, obviously there's technology solutions that, are as much as the humans don't want to think that they will do a better job because they know their customer so well. Usually the AI tool, can do a faster and better job of personalizing it if you're talking about just putting products in front of them that they want.
Correct. That's a very big disclaimer that you're talking about. To me, one of the holy grails of e-com has always been abandoned cart. Mm-hmm. How does an e-commerce brand, how do you, address or deal with or overcome, abandoned carts?
I would say that, I think for us, our main tool, I guess, is really our email flows and SMS flows that will notify, people if there's something in their cart. But I think that, and I guess that's more at the point of like, once they've actually got in the cart and then they've abandoned it, there are obviously tools to remind them what they have in their cart. I think in the past, I saw a lot of people using discounts to get people to get back to their cart. I haven't seen that in quite a while. And I don't think that's something any of our brands are doing at the moment. But then I think at the end of the day, it's really more like what is your messaging up front in the pipeline to make sure that you can't help the fact that and I do it all the time with our brands and with other brands is, I want to build my cart. I want to see how much it's going to cost. I want to apply my promotion. I want to think about it a while. You can't help that customer behavior exists. But, so it really has to be like, how do you drive the intentionality to buy higher up in the process or in the funnel? Meaning, how are you marketing your product to make it feel unique, different, not something you're going to get elsewhere? Obviously, pricing and value versus what else is in the market, product descriptions in terms of, are you both in the PDP and the imagery and in the copy, are you telling them everything they need to know or leaving any open questions about whether that product is going to be the right one for them? Because ultimately it's like, if you can drive extreme desirability for the product, your likelihood of abandoning cart is lower. And then, of course, if there's promotions and other urgency drivers, like it's selling out soon, et cetera, obviously leveraging this sold out 3 times already, right, if you have those popular products. But I think that, of course, there are, plenty of mainstream tools that everyone is using to get people to go back to their cart. But it's really, how do you make them like really, really want it in the first place that they don't have to mull over it for too long?
Exactly. It's because it's fresh. They put it there in the first place in the cart.
Yeah.
So,
but a lot of the time it's because they're checking prices elsewhere. They haven't decided, or like also if I build my cart, if I have 6 things in it, what is the total price? Maybe if I take this one out, how much is it, how much do I save? Like, et cetera.
Do you think some people would use the cart? And I'm literally, Elisabeth, having this epiphany as we're speaking. So if I sound crazy, just tell me. Do you think some people use a cart on any e-commerce site as almost like a bookmark, or go, I don't want to forget about this, I'm just going to stick it in my cart?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Completely. Right. And, and it's something, it's behavior we see obviously ahead of Black Friday, like right now, although some people have already launched their Black Friday offers, but, it's November 15th and customers have been trained that they are, that the brands that they like and they follow are going to start having deep discounts in the next 2 weeks. And so, I think that's also another thing is they're using it as their wish list. To think and saving it for later. And, of course, there's also, websites that, especially this time of year, that will send notifications if there's something in your cart that is dropping price or that is running low on stock. So if you're a very clever, experienced customer, you might even know that you're going to get some sort of notification if it starts getting marked down. But yeah, I mean, for sure, it's I think not everyone has a wish list tool in their website, but everyone has a cart. So
right. So it kind of serves as the de facto wish list when it's not there. Makes sense. Interesting. SEO, which of course is near and dear to Stan Venture's heart. You said something to me off the air about you think it's an expanding channel for brands.
Yeah, I mean, I would say for our brands, at least, it is a big opportunity because I think that certainly for our brands, but I believe this is the case for a lot of brands right now, is, a lot of these D2C brands launched in the 2010s, great founder story, great core product, fairly cheap digital advertising on Meta and Google, and, able to essentially drive a lot of traffic through some like fun, cool, unique value propositions. But the fact is that it's gotten way more expensive this year in particular with the election in the US. It's been, the rates have gone crazy. October was so expensive. And so even though a lot of people are willing to, pay more than they were before for customer acquisition through those digital media channels, it's just you need to find other ways to get customers because it was so relatively cheap and easy to drive customer acquisition through Meta and Google that people kind of forgot a little bit, or I would say spent less time on some of the other sources of traffic that are important in digital and that might not drive the same volume, but can still be very valuable. And now that it's gotten very expensive, I think a lot of brands are just saying to themselves, like, what are other ways that I can drive organic or direct traffic to my website where I don't have to rely on my paid media spending, which, might experience huge surges with something like an election or, blackouts or, whatever else can happen when you're so reliant on one channel. So for us, SEO, specifically at Franken Oak has been an initiative that we've kicked off, earlier this year. Really, we had done a bit in the past, but really took it seriously and is something that is driving good results. I think the learnings and what we know up front is that it requires patience. So to see the results we're seeing now in October, November, and leading up to the holiday, we started really in like May, probably planning earlier on, but really May, June, creating some of that content that we were using to drive, higher SEO rankings. And it has gone quite well for us. So I think for other brands, the next step is to say, what can we leverage through SEO to use it as a complementary channel in order to defray some of the cost and sort of the over-reliance on paid traffic sources.
Yeah, on paid. Exactly. You already answered, I think, one of my next questions, which is what are some big misconceptions about SEO? And I think, not to put words in your mouth, but I think one of them, at least when I thought of it, was a misconception is that SEO is going to work in a month. And it doesn't work that way.
Yeah. And I would say I'm this is not truly my area of expertise. So I wouldn't, say, but I don't know if it's about a misconception because I don't think it does work in a month. Or yeah, I guess the misconception is it will work in a month. I think there's hesitancy maybe from digital teams who are reporting to, whoever the business leader is to I think we live in an era where digital teams need to report to the CEO or the COO or whoever their boss is, and say like, we spent this much and we got this much ROI. And, I think that high level management is now very used to this, immediate feedback loop from marketing investments on digital. So it's like, how much did we spend today? How much ROI was it? What was our customer acquisition cost? What was our conversion rate? Like if it's gone below what we expect, like what do we do? We can change something in 24 hours. And so I think for SEO, maybe it's more that, I think a lot of digital teams really believe in it. It's just that it's harder to sometimes justify and defend to, whatever finance, senior management, any other stakeholders who might have less of an understanding of the long-term investment. And I think that's also the case with a lot of other marketing initiatives. It's like, I could spend $100,000 on a sponsorship for a music festival, which, maybe if you're looking at what you spend on Meta and Google, $100,000 is not actually a lot in your full year, but it's a big risk because it's going to take me a long time to figure out how much that sort of awareness, impressions, it's going to take me a while to figure out whether that was really something that paid itself back in new customers and or customers coming back to the brand if they had lapsed from the brand. And you might never fully know. You just know that you have a lift in organic direct traffic, for months after that, but you can never say exactly where it came from. At least SEO, I think, has some like pretty tangible results. I mean, we have our brand Franken Oak in Canada. One of the SEO exercises we did was around our bomber jacket, which is always a core part of our collection. And now we're one of the top search results in Canada. So it's very tangible and actually say, oh, look, it worked, So I would say it's in the digital world, it's a little bit like slower and maybe harder for people to justify if they're short-term thinking. But in the total marketing world, it's like a pretty clear opportunity.
Yeah. I completely agree.
And the results are fairly clear.
Exactly. Which makes it easier to explain to your bosses.
Mm-hmm.
The ROI of the spend versus return. I want to wrap up on this last topic and get into the topic of leadership with you, because you've been in a lot of different roles in different parts of the world. And I love posing these kinds of questions to folks like you. It may sound like a very cliche question, but so be it. What makes for a great leader? What traits should they have?
I mean, I should have pretty prepared a little more for this one, because there's probably a lot of different, a lot of different ways to explain. But I mean, I would say, gut feel, kind of from my own personal experience. I think one of the most important is really, I would say vision first, obviously. Like, you need to have a leader who has a clear idea of what they're trying to achieve, and therefore can, obviously communicate and explain to people why we are doing this, what is the point, and where are we going. I think fundamentally that's the most important. But then it's, beyond just the ability to communicate that, to cascade it down, et cetera. It's really about having, I think, confidence in your decision making and owning the decision making, even if it's the wrong one, because not all leaders, all leaders are going to make some bad decisions. But I do think like being decisive and sort of cutting off the hemming and the hawing and like, this is the pros and this is the cons. And at what point saying like, we should go ahead with it. And I'm willing to accept the risk, and it's on me basically if it goes wrong. Right. So I think, just having, accountability, ownership, and decision-making confidence essentially to, get towards that vision. And then I think it's really about, I don't know if it's overused, but I think it is about like empathy and being like truly open. And I don't mean empathy as in like, being like concerned if everyone's cat is sick or whatever, or like needing to be best friends with everybody. I mean it really in like understanding what are, what it is like to be in all the different people in the organization. Like, what are their incentives? What are they being motivated by? And then also for your customers, like having that empathy for your customer of understanding, like, don't be mad that they picked a competitor over picking you. You need to say to yourself, like, what is it that's driving that decision for them? And if I put myself in their shoes, like, would I choose me over them, and why? And then how do I fix it? And so I think that it's both for your employees and your team and also your customer. You need to have that like willingness to step outside of your self and your ego to say like, what could they be thinking? And then how do I bring them along on the vision? Because then that helps you, bring them on the vision and what decisions do I need to make? So so I guess some of it would be like, vision, sort of your confidence in your decisions and ability to take it if you make the wrong one. And then, really like being willing to be empathetic to other people's choices and decisions and figuring out like what you need to do differently to get them on board.
I love that because one of the marketing 101 mantras I was taught way early in my career is always put yourself in the mind and eyes and bodies, whatever, of the audience. Meaning you're not targeting yourself. Think about the audience that you're speaking to, trying to engage with, trying to sell something, and so on and so on. But that also applies to your staff, right? So I love that you have that kind of mindset, because I apply the same mindset in my leadership role is think about the person on the other end of that line, whatever that line is.
Yeah, because you can't make them do things that you want them to do something, but if they don't buy in, and if there's a fundamental blocker, you need to understand that. And I think it's also, if you're a leader, ultimately, like, it's not easy to bend people to your will. And people are going to do what they want to do. But so you need to understand like where they are coming from, or you choose people who it's also the way you choose people. Maybe are easy to bend and easier to bend to your will. Like that's also fine. But I think it's more, if you're going to, essentially you need to win hearts and minds, and it's not necessarily by being the most like democratic and like being everyone's friend. But I think that you need to inspire confidence and understand like what people's incentive are in order to align the incentives to your vision. I think that's ultimately, and that's with everything. I think it's with, if you're selling to or customer B2B clients, like you need to understand what's in it for them and show them what you can offer.
Without question. We are up against it. What a great conversation.
Thank you. This is fun.
This absolutely went so fast. And I mean that as the highest compliment, because you captured my attention. Now you're going to capture everybody's attention with your insights. It was amazing. And I cannot thank you enough for coming on.
Well, thank you so much. I love, bouncing ideas and talking to people, and it's a pleasure.
Hey, I'm the guy from the video you just saw. Thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. Now do yourself a favor. If you haven't already, subscribe to our content. Believe it or not, unconfirmed rumors and reports, you will see an increase in 20% in organic traffic just by subscribing. Okay, maybe not, but it's fun, right? But do yourself a favor, really. Subscribe to our content. You won't be sorry. Thanks.